I'm honored to be a part of the Board of Digital Evolution, and so thank you all for being here. I hope you are finding remarkable value and connecting and making brand new friends to do great business together. As Julia mentioned, my life has kind of been renaissance of sorts, a little of this and a little of that, and in short, I served as an intermediary between large-scale companies and inner city communities. I led the way to get Walmart a presence in Chicago. Target was a part of that, coming to Chicago. I also helped Walgreens expand in Chicago. I helped bring Uber to Chicago and other things like that. I'm a singer-songwriter, as she mentioned, and I license music to TV and film, as she also in the entertainment space. I'm executive producing currently, if you've ever heard of Bernie Mac, the comedian, I'm executive producing the Bernie Mac biopic. We brought Steve Harvey in, John Legend and his team, and 2 Oscar award-winning writers have written the script. We're currently getting ready to go out for funding. And so if you would be interested in investing and be a part of that cultural moment, I would love to talk to you. And I also, in development, we have a luxury lifestyle brand. But that's enough about me. We're here to talk to some culture makers today. First of all, Pauline Brown, and I want to nail this, former North American chair of LVMH. We love LVMH. And also former board member for Neiman Marcus and Montclair Spa and several other luxury brands. Can we welcome Pauline Brown, everybody, this afternoon? And then Mr. Alex Luke, who is the former head worldwide of music programming for Apple, and then also the former head of global programming and content strategy for Amazon Music. Can we welcome Mr. Alex Luke, everybody? And so at first I want to begin on a lighter note. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us what you're currently up to.
Well, first of all, let me say, I think I should be interviewing you two about culture. You know, I'm really an observer and maybe at best a sort of congregator of cultural talent. You both are extraordinary creators of it, so I'm honored to be on the panel. So if I discovered anything in my 30-plus year career, it was that there was a real disconnect in many of the businesses I had been in. I actually started my career in the beauty industry. I ended my corporate career in fashion and other luxury goods. In the middle, I was a private equity investor, which is where I invested in Montclair and a few other premium brands. And I was trained to always come at these companies and these brands as a business person. I went to Wharton. Prior to any of this, I was trained as a Bain consultant, so very right-brained in that respect. But before I was trained that way, I was actually, and still am, a left-handed person. And I've always had a great affinity for pure creatives. And I come from a family, a long line of artistic people. And that is a very different way of thinking. It's a different way of producing. There's a lot of value that gets unleashed, but it doesn't get articulated in a way that this very building we're sitting in right now knows how to quantify and express, and often remunerate fairly. So I sit at that intersection. I left my corporate career several years ago, first to write a book. The book is called Aesthetic Intelligence. It's a business book. It was my approach to solving for what I thought business people were by and large missing when it came to building brands that count and that matter and that last and that really connect with people. And I started teaching a course around it, originally at Harvard Business School and more recently, last 5 years at Columbia. And then more recent than all that, I started doing advisory work. So I've worked with some very big companies in hospitality and automotive who are trying to express their brand more powerfully and maybe elevate it, reach people, audiences that elude them, command price points that they can't command on their current marketing strategies. And I also increasingly work with younger, smaller companies. I call this aesthetic equities, in mentoring and supporting them in scaling and in becoming more global and more sophisticated in how they, too, reach new audiences. So that's me.
Some parallels in my path and career. I'm a little bit left brain, right brain. I was a chemical engineering major in college, and I got a job with my student radio station and found that I loved pushing music on people. So I decided I wanted to be a DJ and go into radio and push music on people. I ended up doing radio in Dallas and St. Louis and Chicago. I got out of radio to do digital music in 98, 99, because I felt like the industry was about to shift. I did a startup with a friend and ended up at Idea Lab in Pasadena in LA and was pulled into the Napster organization, and we were working on the relaunch of Napster as a legal music service. I got a call in 2003 from Apple and flew up to Cupertino, interviewed with Steve Jobs, was brought in to manage music industry relations and programming for Apple at a time that it turned into a $6 billion business underneath our feet. And it was during the iPod, iPhone era. It was an unbelievable opportunity and unbelievable learning opportunity and career advancement opportunity. I left there in 2011, went to Capitol Records, worked in the Capitol Tower, doing A&R, worked with Katy Perry, Coldplay, Beastie Boys, did venture capital for 4 years, went to Amazon Music, did the same job at Amazon Music that I had at Apple. And the last 5 years, I've been working across a number of startups that are in the music and tech space, either as an investor or an advisor. And I think it's similar to you. I really look at that notion of mentorship as well. I work with 4 or 5 young artists, and I think that is a two-way street. When you talk about culture, working with young people, it's critical in 2025.
Amazing. You both have been what I would describe load-bearing walls, anchor tenants in the center of culture with some of the largest companies in America, adding so much value to all of our lives. Today, as we talk through the rise of technology in luxury and music, what would you say about that?
Well, on the luxury side, I would say it's been, on the one hand, a very irreconcilable marriage. Most of the luxury brands went into technology, even on the back end of it, and this might sound illogical to people in this room, but went in reluctantly but defensively. The world of luxury has never really built value on efficiency. Not to say it didn't have efficiencies that could have been exploited, but its value was always on taking these sort of heritage concepts, beautifully, often handmade crafts, built in a time and a place that is hard to replicate in other parts of the world. It really taps into these sort of this universal aspiration that people at every income level in the world still have, and the things that drive technology, both the advent of it and also the support and the use of it, requires a very different way of processing. It's about the fastest way to get from point A to point Z. It's a way to reduce costs. It's a way to dehumanize processes, again, an efficiency. And so much of that, both the thought process and even the end result of it, undermines the value proposition. So I think there was a lot of reluctance, and the better luxury brands had the luxury not to have to worry. If Hermes never used technology, its Birkin bags would still be very expensive, and it would be around in another 100 years. They don't run it for the quarter. I think the second and third tier luxury brands felt more of the heat. I think that the tipping point, though, was when technology became not just an enabler for production and for access and for the shopper, but actually for communications. And where I've seen more artistry coming out of luxury and more experimentation in the last few years is on how do we tell our stories using digital media in a way that is a very different art form than what was traditionally done through PR, through advertising, through in-store activations. And so a lot of I think there's some innovation there, but I would say it still pales next to the innovation that I see in digital marketing on other companies like an Apple or entertainment companies. So I think it's one of the things that the luxury company is still grappling. In general, there is not one luxury brand I can think of that would be a best-in-class player in any facet of technology. The best of them are probably just good enough. But it's changing. It's changing, however slowly.
Yeah, I think in music, it's obviously changed dramatically. In entertainment, generally, it's changed dramatically, and it's been driven by both portability and accessibility. You see music and television and film that is more tailored and personalized to an individual's taste. It's led to a fragmentation. There was an expert I spoke to a few years ago who was saying that the data they had seen across from like 2010 to 2018 was telling a very clear story, which was linear live broadcasting, radio, television, the old live broadcast media was being eaten alive by on-demand media. And there was a switch to Netflix and Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon Music and Hulu. And it was just in the last 3 years, it was 2022 for music and 2023 for TV and film, that on-demand surpassed live. Which is surprising to a lot of people because it's so omnipresent in all of our lives. We think it happened 10 years ago. When you look at it from 10,000 feet and look at the general population as a whole, it just passed that. For TV and film, it was streaming on demand was 36% in 2023 to something like 25% for live television, and music hit a 50-50 inflection point when it transitioned. So I think the thing that is changing and continues to change is this notion of fragmentation, and AI. And AI is just another level of personalization and customization and personal accessibility. It's going to fragment it more. And I think the music business is about to go through, and entertainment is going through another upheaval that will be spread across the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. So I want to ask, and this question is for both of you, do you see or view a line of connectivity and opportunity between luxury and music and family offices and private equity?
Yeah, well, I'll step back from technology for a moment, which is not hard to do if I'm speaking on behalf of the luxury world. For sure, not just music, but I think so let me step back even from talking industry terms. Both music and luxury really don't start in a vacuum. They start as part of a movement. They're both art forms, and ones that are universally embraced. I mean, even before we had recording devices, people were making music, right? No other species, as far as we can tell, maybe whales, actually make music. No other species makes luxury goods. The most discriminating dog may want a nice, clean bed to sleep on, but they don't create art on the wall. So this is a distinctly human thing, and it predates any concept of industry. And where these trends, these art forms start is no different than where I would say, other major art movements, painting, or sculpture, where they come from. They come from a sort of social construct, right? And I think what's so the fact that there's this convergence between the industries I come from, fashion and beauty, maybe the industries that we're hearing more in terms of film and music and so forth, that's not new. I think the speed and the ability to marry them very directly, because of things like nowadays you go to the movie and we're not that far off where when The Devil Wears Prada 2 comes out, you will be able to wear Emily Blunt's outfit, or you'll be able to certainly very quickly source where she got that skirt. So I think that just coming back to the technology, it's taking away some of the opaqueness of how those two worlds collide. And I also think the access that that media gives in terms of globalizing everything, the fact that if there's a trend in a Korean, movie studio or a development in a fragrance house, before we know it, every market around the world, if it's really a breakthrough discovery or creative expression, and that allows the influences to also carry much more quickly. So I don't think this is a new phenomenon. I think it's just moving faster, and it's just that much clearer to all of us observing.
Yeah, I think one way they're interconnected is that fashion's visual, and music is being forced to become more visual. The advent of the smartphone has changed the amount of screen time that the average person spends on a daily basis, engaged in whether it's email or social media or television or film or video games. The opportunity for something that is visual and silent has become more of a widespread phenomenon. There's people on their phone right now that are like, you can be in a meeting and look at your phone and have no audio, and that was something that was new with the advent of the smartphone. It's worked its way into the commute, and it's worked its way into the kitchen with devices like Alexa and Echo, and so whether it's audio-only experiences, audio and video experiences, video-only experiences with subtitles, the myriad of sensory experiences for audio and video has expanded, and fashion is a visual medium. And for the young artists that I work with, I tell them all the time, and it's not news to them, but they have to maintain a visual brand. And when you were a recording artist in the 90s, you could spend a day shooting a music video and shooting the cover art for your album, and that was your visual brand. In 2025, you've got to post 3 times today on TikTok and Instagram, and tomorrow and the next day, and that's your visual brand. And do you want your visual brand to be faceless? Do you want your face to show? Do you not want your face to show? Do you want to be mysterious? These are branding questions that young artists have to ask themselves in 2025.
And if I could just add something, because that's a very interesting point you make, that we are a very visual society, but that's image, right? And brands, first and foremost, create impressions that are built on an image, and the first image we have, about 80% of our knowledge and understanding of the world happens through our eyes. 100% of our sense of meaning comes through all of our senses. And I say this because a big part of my work with companies big and small is teaching them how to connect with people, how to create experiences and not rely so heavily on that visual, because it actually falls flat. So if you think of it, there's something, and it's a long conversation that we won't have time for, but it's called cross-modal perception, which means, for example, we actually you can change your perception of quality or of delight based on cues that are other than what we are consciously processing through a sense. Case in point would be, if you have a restaurant, the single biggest or biggest impact investment you can make to convey high quality food is the weight of the utensils. People pick up heavy utensils, they perceive the food as better quality. If I serve two of the exact same desserts, but one is on a black plate and one is on a white plate, people perceive that dessert on the white plate as sweeter. It won't surprise you if, there's certain types of music that make people behave differently, whether it's elevator music in a supermarket, so you go slower, so you fill up the cart, or it's loud, pumping, fast music in a bar, so you consume more, and the economics are kind of predicated by that music or supportive by it. So my only point being, we do spend a lot of time on our phones. It's a problem, but we actually live in our bodies, which is why we haven't stopped, enjoying good meals. And one of the biggest trends in luxury goods in particular is through multisensory, non-visual investments. So there's a concept called haptic delight, which we saw in spades during COVID. People who hadn't touched others, haptic is your sense of feel, who hadn't even, we weren't shaking hands, we weren't hugging our neighbors. They felt a sense of deprivation. It's like they call it haptic starvation, and therefore I saw a big trend. I did some work for two footwear brands. One, their sister brands, Hoka, and the other one, UGG. The only thing nice about either of those brands is how they feel. I mean, they're both, and they would admit it, pretty ugly looking. And both of them have defied the broader trend in the sector. They are doing really well because we want to be comfortable. We want to feel things. So I would just push back in terms of real branding has to be more than how things look. It really has to be how it touches us in space, in real form.
Awesome. So the integration of AI and Web3, I know you touched on it a little bit, Alex, but talk about, I know on the last panel, the gentleman exhorted AI or die. Within your respective fields, what are your thoughts about the integration of AI and Web3?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to AI because I think Web3 is, I view sort of Web3 and blockchain as an enabling technology, and I think AI at the larger is going to have a larger impact. Going back to what we were just talking about with the visuals and the audio as two of your many senses, the immediate impact of AI is that I mentioned this when we were talking outside. It should be an Iron Man suit. If you're a songwriter, it should make you a great songwriter. If you're an artist, it should make you a great artist. You can't. I believe, that's my opinion. You can't use AI to create a song, but you can use AI as a tool to help you craft it. And it should be a song should be a reflection of the artist. And the artist can determine where those boundaries are between themselves and the machine, and they can determine what the output should be and how much of it is a machine versus human. And ultimately, I think AI can be a good thing, and I work with a couple of music AI startups now that are poised to do great things in the space. I think the existing catalog of music can be effectively used to inform new music going forward, and the original artists can be compensated. Artists have been doing that for years. Artists I worked with in the 90s would be like, oh yeah, I've got this David Bowie riff, I'm channeling David Bowie, or I want to sound like Kurt Cobain here, or I want to do this. Artists have been doing it without technology for decades. The technology is just going to enable them to do it more efficiently, faster, better.
I largely agree. So let me start by saying, even though I'm not remotely in the tech world, I use AI every day, multiple times. I would never use it to write an email for me. In fact, as someone who's been for the last many years teaching courses, I can tell when I give students a prompt and it comes back. Not to mention that the prompts all come back the same from all of them. So even the fact that they're replicated so closely. But I also know I can hear a voice. And if I know the student, I know that that's not their voice. So it's a soulless mechanism. It's incredibly powerful. For me, and if I were an artist or a designer or a perfumer, I'd say the same thing. It's a wonderful repository of information and research. I can get, the body of knowledge allows my curiosity to indulge in questions I wouldn't have time for. And so on the one hand, it allows me to be more of an editor, which is where I'll play best. And I think many a musician will sort of be a curator of sound instead of actually just a pure maker. But one thing I will say in my industry, fashion, and I don't mean Shein, which is very much responding to, what the algorithm is telling them, is what colors are coming out, what materials, what silhouettes. High fashion will not work if you ask people what they want. If you ask people what they want, they'll tell you exactly what they would expect to see. Great fashion is what you wouldn't expect to see, which doesn't mean it always works. Even the best designers get it wrong many seasons. And if they didn't have to work on such a tight timeline, they'd probably, have the benefit to get it a little more right more often. But great fashion or as I said, great, any form of artistry, great leather making, it's a craft. It requires experimentation. It requires thinking anew. You are debilitated if your best reference is pattern recognition. Like, I remember in 1973 they came out with this hemline. That gets boring very quickly. So that level of inventiveness will never be fed by AI. It's a real limitation. And so I think if you play this out forward, the way it's going to work, even in creative fields, 3/4 of the people are going to fall into the mass. And 1/4, the really clever ones or the really imaginative ones, are going to use it to their advantage and create things that we could never have imagined and truly surprise and delight. And they'll be over-rewarded for that sort of human imprint that they can make in the process.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing, just keying off what you just said. If AI enables artists and creators to create art that more effectively connects with the audience more often, then consumers are going to be in a world where they're getting what they want more often. And it's going to go back to that issue of fragmentation. We're going to get people kind of I'm going to go off in my goth sci-fi world that I love, and my wife may go off in her bright folk world, and you could imagine a lack of community and a lack of commonality becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And one of the things I think we may be able to rely on AI and technology to solve is bringing it full circle and trying to recreate hubs and communities, because it's so important for the human experience. And the next 5 to 10 years could be a further separation, but there could be a world beyond that where we sort of come together again, for lack of a better way to say it.
Fantastic. So let's go to board governance and board composition. Fostering innovation on boards and engaging the whole idea and concept of, how do I want to say it, tech expertise. What are your thoughts around innovation and tech expertise on boards?
Well, I'll just say two things. One, and I've been a board member of VC-backed companies. I've been a board of a public company. I've been a board of private equity. So I've seen many different iterations. I never felt, and it was a bit of a obstacle for me in the early days when I went from being an operator to a director. The board's job is not to fuel or to master any particular function. It's to ask the right questions. It's a judgment job. Obviously, it helps to have experience and in particularly complex areas. If you're in an operational heavy industry and you're sitting on the board, you better have a pretty sophisticated grasp of supply chain. In the retail world, in the luxury world where I've played, I have to be smart enough to understand where the consumer is, smart enough that if we have a cyber threat, that I know the difference between a really good outside consultant and one who's just selling us a good line but probably can't deliver. I have to be able to ask those questions. I don't have to be an expert. And if I did, I don't think I or anyone else could ever serve on a board. But I think the most important thing is that you have judgment that is appropriate to the value proposition of what that company is and is aspiring to be. On the second part of your question, so if the first part was around innovation and the second part was about technology, I'd say the same thing, by the way, if it was about sourcing or about accounting. I think you know, a good board member is just smart and relevant and understanding of the marketplace and the customer base in order to ask those questions.
Yeah, I mean, my board experience has been mostly with tech startups, and I think there's two critical things I would zero in on. One is you need domain expertise. Someone on the board has to bring some serious domain expertise. I think sometimes if you look at a board that is nothing but domain expertise, you don't get enough of a diversity of thought. And I think those are sort of two things that you need to balance when you're looking at the structure of a board. That diversity of thought is critical because someone who's left brain and someone who's right brain will look at a problem or an issue through a completely different lens and potentially float a completely different idea. And so I think it's those two things. It's diversity of thought and domain expertise.
Awesome. As the clock winds down on our time, I want to see if we can do two more things. Is there anything, any final thoughts or final words you'd like to share for our time?
Well, so when I want to come back to the conversation at large, which is really about the role of technology, the increasing role of it, and how it's affecting governance, how it's affecting corporate management in general, how it's affecting the world we live in. So all told, I'm an optimist. And this is coming from a first-generation American whose grandparents fled the Nazis. So that's not my nature to be so optimistic, but I really am when it comes to technology. You know, and I think a lot of the systems, including our social systems, have to still catch up. We forget just how new these changes are, and oftentimes I think, become very myopic and thinking, oh my God, in the last 3 years, or you know, what's happened in the last 3 months. And we have to know that it's going to be a messy transition, but it's moving in a direction that is societally, I think, pretty exciting. But the one thing that I'm even more optimistic about than what technology might yield is what I call the human advantage. The more prevalent these systems become, the more the things that those systems aren't is invaluable. So I often say, for example, if I could have a McDonald's-based meal, I don't, but if I could have one tomorrow that was made by a robot, and I wouldn't know the difference. I might even think it was better. I would not have a Michelin star restaurant made by a robot in my lifetime, certainly not designed by a robot. That human touch, the human touch of deciding, you know, and if you ever watch like a great chef in the kitchen, they're not just measuring things to perfection. They are sort of taking in the aroma. They're looking with their eyes at how the concoctions are coming together. There's a presentation that happens, and often a lot of last-minute tweaking of how, you know, a little sprig on a plate will sit. There's a lot of art that goes into that process. And that, you know, I go back to, at every price point, people want these elevated experiences. It's what makes us feel alive. It's what makes us, our lives feel meaningful. So as all of this continues to happen, I feel like those that don't forget that these human connections, the relationships we have that were not on Match.com, but actually are in place, the physical spaces, I think that's even becoming more valuable and more coveted.
I think that's a really valid point. Over the years, I've seen this, that, I've seen it, I'll just make the comparison to music, which I know inside and out. If music becomes too homogenous, a band like Nirvana comes along, or the Sex Pistols comes along, or Billie Eilish comes along and completely upends the definition of pop music or rock music or hip hop, or it happens in all genres of music, and it happens as a reaction to homogeny. And I think humans will respond with something that's not homogenous.
Fantastic. Before we go, I should warmly apologize for one of my dearest friends, Mr. Brant Kreider, who was scheduled to be here, president of Saint Laurent, but his bosses from Paris flew into LA and summoned him to LA at the last minute. And so since they pay him, he had to kindly cancel and rush to LA. So he's very sorry he couldn't be here, but I wanted to offer his warmest apologies. Let's thank Pauline Brown and Alex Luke. Thank you so much.